Well, hello YouTubers, and welcome back to the Wholesome channel and another episode of This Old Planer. Today we're in the clutches of evil. The clutch for the feed mechanism here is going to need a little bit of resurfacing. I'll bring the camera around here in a little bit and show you why. The two halves of this clutch are like a morse taper, and so when they come together they engage, and through friction the whole thing gets its bond, its energy, so to speak. Now, with the part that moves, I can't take off a whole hell of a lot, or on the other part, the rigid part. It's just one of those things. There's a little bit of a groove that wore itself into the movable part, and the other part is a little bit dished across the surface. So, and I don't want to put a lathe tool on here, so what we're going to do is we're going to get out the tool post grinder and we're going to resurface this. So there's only a few hundredths of a millimeter of dishing going on here. Excuse me. But it's enough to affect the operation of the clutch. So let me bring the camera around here. I've got the mag base on here and the dial indicator to show, and then I set the compound for the taper. As it turns out, this is actually a little over about 3.5 degrees of taper on this pulley here, and so we got to maintain that, and you ascertain that by doing what I did. I'll show you that when I bring the camera around here. So anyway, let me grab the camera, bring it around. Okay, here's our setup. I'm going to zoom in here so that we get a good bird's eye view of the indicator here. Right now we're on the high side. It tapers off to the tailstock here, and this is the low side. And as you watch the dial indicator, you'll see the dish that's formed here where it's actually quite shiny. So let me zoom you in here. Okay, so we're a few millimeters here from the edge. If I bring it on out, you can see the needle. If I bump that, the needle has movement. So we've got plenty of travel in our feeler here. So let's run this back. As you can see, we're still at 0, and now we're starting to see some movement in the needle. Now this is where the dishing comes in, and you can see we're about 3/100ths of a millimeter off. And now as we approach the edge, now we're going back up. It took quite a bit of time to get this thing dialed in because of the dishing there, and it was hard to ascertain what degrees it was and so forth and yada yada yada. So I didn't really want to bore you guys to death with 20 minutes of dinking around back and forth here trying to get this all established. And so now we got to, like I say, put the tool post grinder on here, and we're going to use the compound to grind this surface. So let me back everything away, get everything set up, and I'll bring you back as soon as we get ready to grind the surface. our final ground. I had to take a little bit of emery cloth to polish it up a little bit. It just started chattering. I don't know what's going on with the grinder. I suspect I have the wrong stone. The salmon stone didn't want to do the job, and neither did the white one. So I'm not sure what I need to use here on cast, or at least this particular cast, but we have the thing back in round within a 200ths. And as you watch the needle bounce around a little bit, I'm going to bring it up to 0 here on the dial. So we got about 2/100ths of a millimeter out of round, which, given this old lathe, I'd say that's about as good as it's going to get on here. So now we need to grab the other part of the clutch and put it on. What I also did, some of you may have noticed, is I put the wheel on the other way, so that way I don't have to change the angle on the compound again in order to grind the other half of the clutch to where, you know, the female side. So that way I can just leave everything the way it is, put everything on, and go to town. So that's what we're going to do next, and go from there. Well, as you can see here, by the witness mark, we don't have quite the surface all the way through. I'm just going to leave this the way it is right now, because if I put a little buffing compound on here later on, this part will run in and then mate itself to the other half of the clutch. But let's stick a dial indicator on here and see how round we are. So we're back to our usual 2/100ths of a millimeter for outer roundness. It's either in the arbor or in the chuck or in the tailstock, but overall it could be better, it could be worse. It was a whole lot worse. It was like almost 1/2 millimeter out of round before I stuck when I stuck it on here the first time and checked it out. So with that, I think we're going to just call it good, and I'm going to tear this setup down and then go get the gear and show you guys how this mates together. So here's how this clutch is supposed to work. I've got the gear side here in the jaw. This is actually the movable part, whereas this is the part that is kind of fixed on the shaft. I mean, the shaft doesn't spin, but this does rotate on the shaft. So anyway, we got that shouldered part of the shaft in here. And as this closes, you can see that's for, a pretty tight fit. So, and we still got a little bit of play in here to where the thing will close. Now we'll end up taking off 1 millimeter here and 1/2 millimeter on this face, and then the same thing on the inside of this. Let's see if we can get this off of here without too much trouble. So, and then took off 2.5 millimeters here. So that ended up being the right formula for getting this thing to fit together. So Now we have a workable clutch again. Well, YouTubers, that's a wrap for this episode of This Old Planer and the Clutch of Evil. I think I got the evil driven out of it finally, hopefully. We shall see when it goes to time to put this thing back together. I may have to take the spur gear that engages this here and shave 1 millimeter or 2 off each side of it so that the reduced or the increase in travel is compensated for on the shaft. This thing is about 10 millimeters wider than the spur gear that goes into it, and so it may very well be that I won't have enough travel in that. I doubt it, but with the slop in that half moon piece of brass, that engagement collar, may not get the travel out of it that we want. So we shall see. Anyway, now you can see that how this thing works, or how it's supposed to work, and I guess we'll see when the thing's put together how it's going to work and if it's going to work. So anyway, that's a wrap for this for today's episode. Stay tuned for some more. Right now I'm doing some of the painting and de-rusting and that kind of stuff. Garden variety jobs that I don't need to bore you guys with. However, just rest assured progress is being made, and the critical stuff that is coming up you guys will get to see, so that way if you do have a planer like this or something similar to it, you guys can take notes from it and apply it to your situation if you have to. So with that, if you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, critiques, put them down in the doobly-doo down below, or if nothing else, just to say hi or screw you or whatever. I've gotten a few of those over the years too, so I just take it with humor. But anyway, if there's something on your mind, put it in the doobly-doo down below. And thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you guys all again soon.